Unit 6, Learning Target Number 2. Understand that a data set has center, spread, and shape. The shape of a set of data can tell us a lot about the information. For example, here we have a graph, and it says a study was done to find out the number of years people had been working at a cereal factory. This graph shows the result. So here we have the number of years that they've worked, 1 through 20. And here we have the frequency, the number of people who have worked at the factory that long. So for example, here we have at the top, we have 200 people who've been working for 11 years. We have 11 people who've been working for 20 years, 15 who've been working for 1 year. And this shape of the data tells us something. Tells us something about the data. For example, we can look over here and see that there are only 11 people who have been working for 20 years at that cereal factory. There are only 11 people who have been there for 20 years. And if you notice, you see people who worked about 11 years. That's where most people are at. And then maybe they start to quit. They start to get another job. They get tired of working there. You also have very few people who are only 1 year. Right? So what might that tell us? It might tell us that they're not hiring a lot of people. They've already got a lot of people who are in this 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 through 16 age range. And so they don't need a lot of people. So there's a very few number of people who come in new. So we need to learn some words about how data has shape and what that means. So the first one, 3 that we'll look at actually are center, spread, and peak. The center of the data. The center of the data is where most of the data is. It's where most of the data is. So in our case, the center of the data here is pretty much right here in the middle, right? We can look at this and we can see it builds up. Most of the stuff is right here in this little section here. That's the center of the data. So where's the center? I'm going to say it's around 200. And we could find the average or the median, which we'll talk about later, and that will tell us where the actual center is. Let's also talk about the spread. We see this data has a spread. It moves from one place to another. We have this edge and this edge. So this is the spread of the data from here to here. The data spread is from 1 to 20. And we can use things like range or interquartile range to measure spread of the data. So we'll say the spread is from 1 to 20. And where is the peak of the data? Where is most of the data? Well, in our case, the peak is right here at 200. Now, it doesn't have to be. Sometimes the peak will be over on this side. Maybe the peak would be at 109. Or maybe the peak is all the way over here at 11. But the peak of the data tells us also where one situation where most of the data is. So here's an example problem here. The data shows the number of students on a travel soccer team by age. So we have 8 to 14 here, and these are the different numbers of people. Each X represents one person on that travel soccer team. So where is the center of the data? Well, we'd have to do calculations of mean and average to find out the exact center, but we could probably say it's somewhere around here. Somewhere there in the middle, we'd say 11 might be the center of that data. Now let's describe the spread of the data. So it spreads from here to here. So there's actually a thing called the range that allows us to describe that spread of the data, but we could say it is from 8 to 14. Where is the peak of the data? Which one of these has the highest peak? You can think about it like a mountain. Here's a mountain, and here is a mountain, and here is a mountain. Well, which mountain has the highest peak? Well, this one does. So the peak is the number 10. So where's the peak of the data? It's at 10. The 10-year-olds are the largest number of students on the team. Now, are there any gaps in the data? Let me get rid of some of the drawings here. Is there any gap in this data? A gap is just an open place. Now when you look at this, you can see there are a couple of holes here. Right over here, for example, is one hole between 8 and 10. So 9 is one gap. And then there's a gap at 13 here. There's no X above this guy. So there is a gap. There are two of them, in fact, at 9 and 13. What does the shape of this data tell us? Well, there are a couple things we can learn. We can learn that the majority, or the age that is most represented on this team is 10. We know that there aren't as many younger kids, and once we get down to 9 and 8, there aren't many of them. There's only one. There aren't many 13 and 14-year-olds either. There's just this one little 14-year-old over here. We can tell that most of the students in this data, most students are between 10 and 12. 10 and 12. So most of our students are right here in the middle. And we learn all that from the shape of the data.